Hi, I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream, now live on YouTube. Today, the political turmoil in Kenya. Is the country's upcoming rerun presidential election in jeopardy now that the opposition candidate has withdrawn from the race?
I am Josephine Gums-Connor, attorney at law. I'm in Anguilla, and I am in the stream.
On Thursday, Kenyan officials banned all protests as the election standoff between the opposition and ruling party escalates. This week, the opposition leader and presidential candidate, Raila Odinga, withdrew from the upcoming rerun election. The news follows weeks of protests by his supporters who believe Odinga unfairly lost. In September, the Supreme Court ruled the election invalid and ordered this rerun to take place. But now that Odinga is out, what will happen? Well, joining us from Nairobi to discuss this, we have Kamotha Waiganjo. He's a constitutional lawyer and former commissioner with the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution. Esther Pasaris, she's a member of the National Assembly and an Odinga supporter. Johnson Sakaja, he's a member of the ruling Jubilee Party and senator for Nairobi City County. And my colleague, Catherine Soy, she's a reporter with Al Jazeera English covering East and Central Africa. Welcome to the stream, everyone. Now, Catherine, we know the government, good to have you here. We know the government has banned protests in 3 major city centers. You can see this headline here on my screen. This is what our community thought about that. AMB Majid says, totally unacceptable. It's a direct attack on our Bill of Rights. Our Constitution enshrines freedom of peaceful demonstrations. Someone else, though, says it's a good thing. This is Munchera, who says we welcome that decision. These demonstrations are purely for Raila Odinga's selfish interests, and they do not represent us. Catherine, what's behind this move to ban protests, and how are other people reacting?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And the Cabinet Secretary for Interior Cabinet Secretary had this press conference earlier, and he gave reasons why the government has banned protests in Kisumu, that's in Western Kenya, in the central business districts in Kisumu, in Western Kenya, in Mombasa, at the Kenyan coast, and here in Nairobi. And he cited security reasons. In the last few days or so, we've increasingly, Malika, been seeing cases where people are being robbed. We've seen cases where shops are being vandalized. Opposition leaders and opposition supporters, of course, have come out to say that thugs who've been hired are being used to infiltrate and cause chaos in what they believe are peaceful demonstrations. They've also accused police of using excessive force. In the last, I think a few weeks ago, we saw videos of police harassing and beating up students at a university here in Nairobi yesterday. We also saw in Kisumu during the riots, we saw people injured, dozens of people were injured, several people are hospitalized with gunshot wounds. So the Cabinet Secretary for Interior saying that the reason why these protests have been banned in this area is to avoid an escalation of violence. But the opposition has said that this demonstrations against the Electoral Commission and calling for electoral reforms are going to go on.
Right. Esther, you've attended some of those demonstrations, and I've seen videos of you out there. What do you make of this ban?
Well, I think it's basically this is what Jubilee has been doing. You know, they've been trying to curtail all our freedoms. I mean, at the end of the day, the right to picket, the right to demonstrate is in our Constitution. And when we apply and when we notify them they were going to have a demonstration, it is their duty to provide security. In the initial stages, they were tear gassing us. We were not allowed to demonstrate. Over the last 3 demonstrations in Nairobi, they were actually escorting us. We never had any problems. In fact, if you look at the last 3 or 4 demonstrations, we carried branches, tree branches. We put our hands up. We danced along the streets. We were not violent in any way. And when we saw somebody who was trying to steal, we actually reprimanded them and gave them to the police. There were not enough police to actually maintain order. There were more policemen to try and stop the demonstration. And now the ban basically is another attempt by the government to ensure that we go in the reverse in terms of our democratic rights.
So this is what one member of our community had to say. We will never back down. We shall stand to defend our supreme constitution and our rights. We shall never be cowed. Kamotho, help take us back to how we got here in the first place. Help us understand, why did Mr. Odinga withdraw from the election?
My understanding from the statement that Mr. Honorable Odinga gave both to the press and also to the Electoral Commission was that they had issued 11 irreducible minimums that would have to be fulfilled if they were going to participate in the elections. In their perspective, those issues have not been resolved, and consequently, they do not feel that they can participate, because from their perspective, if they participate, then they would be legitimizing another rigged election. I have, by the way, looked at the 11 reducible minimums. I would say, a fair amount, maybe 50% of them are basic administrative issues about technology and who needs to log in what. Some are fundamental. They go to the very core of what a free and fair election should look like. And the commission has responded, admitted to some, I think maybe about a third or maybe about 40% of them. They have said some others are not possible for the reasons they have given. I think those are contested naturally by NASA. And so that is where we came from. And I think I want to go to something that Esther, my good friend Esther Passaris, the new women rep for Nairobi. And to say this, I think we must recognize the context in which we are in. The reality is that we do not have enough policemen to protect the city from demonstrators. And you see, demonstrators Esther may have the best of intentions, and I don't doubt it. But I don't think when you have 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 young men coming to the CBD, that there is any way in which you can ensure that the circumstances in which Esther is talking about, which are very reasonable, can be dealt with. I would be concerned if Fred Matiang'i had said, Fred Matiang'i is a cabinet secretary, that we are not going to allow demonstrations in Nairobi. But if we're talking about the central business district, I think that is reasonable. What we should be saying, in Nairobi, because the people of Nairobi are entitled to demonstrate, what is it we can do so that we also respect the rights of those that are going about their business in the CBD, going on with their shopping, going on with their other activities? That is what you should be asking. I don't think an outright saying we're going to do it anyway is also the answer. And part of the problem in this country is that we never converse to one another. We talk back at each other. And I think that's something we need to be saying. And what I would have expected a reasonable opposition to do is to say, listen, we recognize the challenges that are there when you have those groups of young people. Why don't we then say that we're going to demonstrate on this side of, for example, the main highway?
Kamotho, I hear you there. I had to write down what you said. We never converse with each other. So this show will be an opportunity for that. So I want to bring in a few more voices. This is Nida.
The people who should be conversing don't converse with each other. But
I hear you. I take your point. But you mentioned the elections and not wanting them in the central business district. We also got people online who were saying exactly the same thing. But here is why some people say they're so angry. This is Nida. She says, Raila Odinga has had his election victory stolen 3 times. All his supporters want is electoral reforms to guarantee a free and fair, verifiable, and credible election. Johnson, I want to bring you in here on this point. What do you make of this?
Well, it's still out there. We went to an election, and of course it went to the Supreme Court of Kenya, which nullified the election. And in that nullification, there was never a question about the amount of votes that President Uhuru Kenyatta got as opposed to Raila Odinga. In fact, the election was nullified based on certain irregularities and illegalities. And all over the world, there's no perfect election. So the president has accepted the rule of law and has accepted to go back to another election. There are very few presidents in the world and in Africa, no less, who would accept their own victory to be subject to another election. And it's because we believe in the
questionable
rule of this
victory
country on a constitution. Our constitution is very progressive. It allows anyone to demonstrate so long as they demonstrate peaceably and unarmed. I think the photos you've shown there are very clear. Those people are carrying stones. I'm sure those stones are not accessories. They have been looting property. They have, harassed people, innocent Kenyans, and that is why we have banned those protests. Because unless you're protesting in a peaceful manner, and as what
NASA
happens
didn't
all over the
have
world,
stones.
we're not allowed.
Sakaja,
Esther,
very
Esther, I want to bring you in here, but I just want our international audience to know that NASA is the opposition National Super Alliance, just so we're all on the same page. Go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we've always demonstrated, and right now we've actually stopped because, of course, we were branded by the government as being violent. We'll carry stones, we want to loot, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, you know what I find really strange about this government? It's how they're handling the human rights issue. We've had so many people killed in Kisumu. Why is the government using such high-handed approaches when it's dealing with demonstrators? I didn't see the CS Matiang'i talking about the lives that are lost. He's talking about the property. He's even asking people to come forward and actually give him the list of the things that have been stolen or damaged. Nobody's obviously going to probably complain. He's asking them, he's trying to attract them in. And the thing is, most of the people that have come into our demonstrations are Jubilee-financed gangs, you know, calling themselves the Nairobi business community.
Esther, let's move away from Nairobi for a moment. Let's go to Kisumu, because Kisumu, obviously, there are no Jubilee, there are no huge Jubilee supporters who are also demonstrating and stopping NASA demonstrators from carrying.
No, but a lot of the people that were there were not NASA supporters.
Let me finish. In Kisumu, who looted Tumaini? It was Jubilee supporters. I mean, what I'm saying, let's recognize.
After you start shooting them with live bullets.
After we start shooting them with live bullets, does that make it reasonable for them then to loot supermarkets? I'm just saying.
No, but the government has always
So Kamotho and Esther, I hear you, and I hear the point that you're making, and I love your passion because our online community is feeling exactly the same way on those two sides. But I want to bring this in because we're live on YouTube, and we got this comment from Hecken who says, what does Odinga want to achieve with this? And of course, Catherine, you cannot speak for Raila Odinga, but according to your reporting, what do you think he's trying to achieve?
Well, let me just bring in a point, just going back to the demonstrations. I think both sides are to blame, really, because I've been covering these demonstrations since they started. I was in Kisumu in August, just after Uhuru Kenyatta was declared winner, and I saw what happened. People were looting in those areas we were in. And again, police really used a heavy hand. They were very aggressive with the people. We went to hospital and spoke to victims, people who had been shot by police. They showed us all these cartridges that they had. And here in Nairobi as well, we saw looting happening and things like that. And also police using very heavy hands. So I think the blame goes both ways. Now, back to your question about what Raila Odinga hopes to achieve. I cannot speak for him, but from what he's been saying is that he wants a fresh election conducted. He wants to give the Electoral Commission time to implement and to, reform to reform the election, to reform the Electoral Commission ahead of any election. So that's what he wants. He says he just wants to have a fair level ground so that he can participate at par. So that's what he really wants. That's what he's been saying. But supporters of Jubilee, that's the ruling party led by the president, says that he is just power hungry. He is self-serving, and he just wants to create chaos and make this country ungovernable so that they can sit down and sort of have a power sharing arrangement of sorts. That's my understanding.
Raila Odinga is not interested in a power sharing. That's part of the Jubilee conversations, and that's what they're trying to make people believe. They demonize Raila. At the end of the day, Raila wants what is democratically right. Whether he wins or he loses, it's not important. What is important is that everybody's vote counts. He wants to make sure that we actually have an electoral system that is not biased, that is actually going to conduct an election that is free, fair, and credible. And we never had that. And we are so proud of our judiciary. And as we can see, I mean, Jubilee is doing everything wrong. I mean, even immediately after the Chief Justice's ruling, in spite of the fact that they accepted it, right? At the end of the day, the steps that they've taken, including coming up with a new election bill, it's obvious that they want to make sure that at any cost, Jubilee emerges as the winner. And we're saying we cannot go through an election without reforms.
I hear you there. I wrote down what you said, so I didn't get you wrong. Jubilee is doing everything wrong. Kamotho, I know you want to get in, but I have to let Johnson reply to this. Johnson.
Yes. I mean, Esther is saying a lot of interesting things. Number one, government has not branded Raila Odinga supporters as looters. They have been looting. They have been causing so much chaos in the city and all the cities. So it's not government that's running them. They're doing it themselves. Number two,
the levels of poverty, people take advantage of it.
Raila Odinga is on record himself telling his supporters that he wants to see his young people coming out violently. He wants to see even the inner.
There was a doctored Jubilee. That was a doctored Jubilee video.
We have no.
All right. So since I cannot independently verify that video, finish up your point, Johnson. Then I want to bring our community in.
What he's saying, his actions are speaking louder than his words. We've had settings where we can have bipartisan engagement to discuss reforms on the Electoral Commission. This is a country built on institutions. You know, if you don't want to
we don't discuss, you dictate. We don't discuss, you dictate.
Where they've been elected to be members to discuss these reforms, we will not join them in the streets to discuss reforms. We have a rule of law. The High Court has said that the election goes on the 26th. So the Supreme Court declared that we have an election on the 26th. If you have the support that you claim to have, come face us at an election, and after that, let the Kenyans decide.
So I'm glad that you mentioned the election on the 26th. This is where I want to bring this conversation back to. I hear the passion about the protests, and I know that that is still on the top of people's minds. But the 26th is looming. This is a tweet we got from Thanwe, who says, Odinga should have continued the fight through the ballot because the withdrawal has put his supporters to shame. Another person weighs back in on that and says, he knew he would lose, and that's why this happened. He evaluated it, and he doesn't have the people's vote. So what does this actually mean for the October 26th election? There's been some discussion about whether or not Odinga's withdrawal is actually a done deal at all. Yes, he made his announcement, but is there still some wiggle room for him to get back in? I want you all to have a listen to this from broadcaster NTV Kenya.
This withdrawal by this letter, and here again I agree with Joy, has got no anchoring until you file Form 24A.
Okay.
That is when it crystallizes into a withdrawal, because withdrawal is supposed to be filed using a prescribed form.
So Kamotho, what does this actually mean for the October 26th election?
The truth of the matter is that 2-3 days ago, when Honorable Raila Odinga withdrew from this process, I think the country was put in a spin. The reality is that because our rules had never anticipated these sorts of situations, people didn't know where to go. Fortunately, yesterday morning, the High Court, one of the High Court judges gave a very reasoned judgment about what should happen in terms of who is entitled to be on the ballot, what are the rules in terms of nominations, and what are the circumstances that should, what are the things that we have to ensure that we have an election within the 60 days. The reality is we are a constitutional democracy. We have an institution that is set up to conduct elections. We have a court to which we go to when we have disagreements. I think because we are still very delicate, the least that somebody like Honorable Raila Odinga, who has paid a heavy price for that constitution, the most he should be doing is ensuring that we are doing everything to build these institutions. They are not perfect, by the way. They're going to make mistakes. Sometimes they'll make mistakes that are deliberate. Sometimes they'll make because, you know, they're also learning. But I think it's important that we grow and build the institutions. Where we are going is actually destroying these institutions. Then I would ask Esther and others, where will we go? Those courts that we're talking about that have been very good, sometimes for NASA, sometimes for Jubilee, when things go wrong, where are we going to go? And by the way, Esther, for the record, I don't think myself, I have total contempt for the police when they shoot people. By the way, even when people are committing certain offenses, there are times when there's something called disproportionate force. So I don't think anyone says that, so therefore, if you say no looting, you're saying police should shoot. No. But what you're saying is that a responsible opposition ensures that you also put your supporters out of harm's way. And one of those things is what Fred Matiang'i is proposing. So I just needed to make that point to say that what we are saying is, let us be reasonable. Let us recognize we are not working in a perfect world. We're working in a situation where we are building institutions. These elections should go on in the manner proposed. If there are challenges, the courts are still there. We will go back to those courts. Well, and if the elections were not done in accordance with the Constitution, they will be set aside, Esther. You cannot be a judge in your own cause.
With due respect.
Yes.
No, hold on. With due respect, all right?
Yes.
Neither can Jubilee be a judge in its own cause. The fact that they've actually brought an election bill. All right. No, but hold on. Bringing in an election bill because they have the tyranny of numbers, so to speak, right? Trying to amend the laws and to try and make sure that nothing can go wrong with them again in case they mismanage this election.
Esther,
Let's face it.
Esther, laws,
if this election was well managed, we should have
Laws
actually
are
opened the
amended
service.
all the time.
Jubilee,
By the way, the court.
yeah,
the
but you
court
don't
amended
amend
the law
a law
yesterday.
2 weeks
So
to an
Esther
election.
and Kamotho,
The
I
court
weeks to an
hear
amended the law
you.
yesterday.
Esther and Kamotho, I hear you. I want to bring in Catherine, who's kind of
Thank you.
raising her hand so she can get in. Go ahead, Catherine.
I'm being suffocated by all the noise. But can I just jump in here and about Raila Odinga? And to be fair, I've been speaking to a lot of his supporters and people also who do not support his move, but they say, surely, how do you expect him to participate in an election that the Supreme Court, being conducted by the same people that conducted the previous election that the Supreme Court said was shambolic. So people who I've been talking to are saying he's within his rights. There needs to be some reforms. So, I mean, just to, support
Absolutely.
or talk after Esther is he is within his rights. Like there needs to be some reforms, and some of these issues that he's asking for are reasonable. That's my understanding from a lot of people that I've been talking to as well.
Well, what I don't understand is if the president's
Esther,
election.
I know you have a question, but Johnson is trying to get in here, and we haven't heard his voice in a while. Johnson, go ahead.
Our Supreme
Still
Court
there?
was very clear. Issues that were that were raised in the Supreme Court were process issues. There were issues to do with clarity of the law. Parliament has not been suspended, and the Supreme Court did not indict any individual within the IEBC. In fact, the Supreme Court mandated the IEBC to conduct a fresh election within 60 days. So to say that for you to go back to an election, for it to be free and fair and credible, you are the one to determine who sits in the commission, who doesn't sit in the commission. That is not building institutions. Now, when the Supreme Court has said, and all judges always say, that nothing would have been easier than for Parliament to provide for A, B, C, D. That is what Parliament is doing. We have asked our members from the opposition to join that process. And it's not about a spectacular vote. I'm a member of the Senate. In the committee that we set up, we have 5 members from Jubilee, and we expected 4 members of the opposition. Even if they came there and disagreed with us, democracy is about the majority, yes, having their way, but the minority must have their say. Esther Passaris has been elected by the people of Nairobi to be the women for Nairobi, not in the streets of Nairobi, but in Parliament, where you parley, you balance, you discuss these issues. Now, if you don't want to engage in bipartisan discussions and want us to engage in the streets, I'm sorry, we will not engage in the streets, because this is a country that follows the rule of law, not the rule of man, and certainly not the rule of one man called Raila Odinga.
So I want to bring up this headline. I want to bring up this headline because, Kamotho, you alluded to it. Kenya has passed a controversial election bill which is deepening its political uncertainty. Now, on Wednesday, the parliament passed a new law that says if one candidate withdraws, the other automatically wins the presidency. This is what our community has to say about that. Rukundo says, so the ruling coalition has passed more laws that make it impossible for the opposition to survive in elections, and thus Raila's withdrawal. Of course, the withdrawal came before that. But just looking forward, Esther, what do you think might happen? Do you have a sense of what might happen?
Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, I mean, for me and all Kenyans, we can't understand if Jubilee actually won this election. I can't understand why the president would want to continue with the same people in office who bundled an election that was costing this economy 40 billion shillings to approve another budget of 10 billion to conduct an election with the same players. Now, we have actually said we want to reform the institution. We would rather delay the election, but have an election that is free, fair, and credible. Because what was the point of fighting for all the democratic rights? We've got over 300 petitions in our courts. How can we send all these petitions back to the same body to conduct an election? We really need to be honest and sincere here. This is not about putting Jubilee back in power. This is not about taking us back to one-party state from a multi-party democracy. This is about Kenya. And if any of the people, the legislators that are in Jubilee care about Kenya, they will not take us backward. And I think Raila Odinga...
So, Esther, I'm going to pause you there. I hear you, and I know there will be pushback online to that as well. This is all the time we have, though. I have to end the conversation here. A big thank you to our guests and our community for joining us. But before we go, a quick reminder that we're now streaming live on YouTube. So check us out. You'll find the link to the live show every day on the Al Jazeera English YouTube page. It's right there under upcoming live streams, and you can be part of heated discussions like this one on Kenya. Until next time, I'll see you online. Take care.